Hello. We're talking here about Martin Luther King's third principle of nonviolence. These principles are found in his first book, Stride Toward Freedom. And in this book, right in the middle, chapter 6, is a chapter called Pilgrimage to Nonviolence. And I'm expanding on the principles in these videos and talking about them from the point of view of a psychologist. And in each video, I'll try to identify some connections between the psychological research that is relevant or that relates to a principle. And principle 3 is a rather important one in that regard. Principle 3 asks us to attack the problem, not the people. And that kind of idea is found in many systems for solving problems and for planning negotiations and so on. In Dr. King's words, he says the attack is directed against the forces of evil rather than against persons who happen to be doing the evil. He's warning us against making problems personal. That's one way of looking at it. But we have a tendency, as we'll see, to do exactly that. We have a tendency to personalize our problems in a number of different ways, including the tendency that Dr. King was trying to warn us about in Principle 3. The issue is that we're embedded in many systems in society and in our communities that are not fully just. They are unjust. And when there is injustice, there is usually a visible leader who kind of represents the injustice, represents the approach. It may be a dictator, it may be a corrupt governor or president. It may be a leader at the community level. And very often when we suffer from the injustice, our tendency is to blame the leader. We may miss the fact that there is a whole system and a whole history and a whole culture that is unjust, and we often do not solve that problem, that larger problem, by getting rid of the leader. We have many examples of this throughout history. But we have this tendency to demonize the leaders of other groups, whether those other groups are unjust or not. We as I've mentioned in other videos, when our group is in opposition to another group, we tend to distance ourselves from them. We tend to avoid them. Therefore, we tend not to have full information about them and who they are and what their interests are and what they want and what they need. But nevertheless, we form opinions about them. We form stereotypes about them that are rather cartoonish sometimes. And we vilify their leaders because the leaders come to symbolize the other group and everything that we dislike about it. Dr. King made this really important distinction, which is psychologically very, very sound, between the injustice of a system and the people who happen to be the figureheads of that system. And he advised his followers, don't settle for just attacking the leaders. That's a red herring. That's going to take you off in a direction where you're going to expend a lot of your emotional energy, and it's not going to solve the problem that we're trying to solve. It's not going to solve racism. It's not going to solve segregation. It's not going to solve the inequity of some school children being given advantages that other children are not given, and so on and so on. There are many forms of injustice. In psychology, in social psychology, there is a phenomenon that is so widespread and so strong in our makeup as human beings that it is called the fundamental attribution error. It's an error that we make when we're mentally assigning the cause of something that's gone wrong. The fundamental attribution error, to oversimplify a bit, is a quick tendency to blame rather than to seek information about the situation and to really try to understand it. Our first impulse as human beings is often not to gather the information we need, but it is to assign blame and to come up with a very simple explanation for why things have gone wrong, which we then proceed to act on. And we often make terrible mistakes by going down that path. So Dr. King's principle 3, in a different vocabulary, is a topic of study in psychology. We actually know a lot about it. But Dr. King had great intuitions about it, and he was a very astute psychologist. Most of his principles reflect that astute understanding of human nature. And a way of understanding each principle is that he's trying to warn us about something in us that can trip us up, a glitch in our human nature that can derail a program of nonviolent social change or just a program of rational discourse and problem solving. We owe him a debt for being so clear and for having such a good understanding of human nature that's very close to the heart once we understand it. So if you got something out of this video, please subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and I will be back very soon with a short discussion of the fourth principle, the next one in the series. Until then, have a good day.